4 p.m. And I'll start off by taking a roll of the task force members in attendance. So when I call your name, please unmute and say here. Let's start with Jason.
Here.
Marisol.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
Nina.
Here.
Pavel. Issaquah. Trish. I can see you, and I know you tried to come off mute, so Trish is here, just in case anybody's wondering. Brookie Scholl is not going to be joining us today. Grace.
Here.
Great. Janine. Oh, Janine also may be a few minutes late, but is expected to come today. Shashi.
Here.
Great, thank you. Just checking to see if we have all of our alternates here or not. I did hear Ron. And now I don't.
Good morning.
Hi, Ron. Marlene. And Stephanie, I believe, is on.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we're going to do a few administrative things first. And I just wanted to say thank you all for coming today. I so appreciate that you've joined this task force, but also on one of the nicest days of the year, you're coming inside with me to do a meeting for 90 minutes. So thank you very much for that. The administrative item we're going to take care of is the approval of the minutes from May 14th. And is there any objection to approving the May 14th, 2020 meeting minutes, which were provided online with the agenda? Not seeing any hands up in the air. I see Administrator Bobkowitz has joined us now. So hearing no objection, the minutes are approved as presented. We do have some staff with us today that you may not have met before. Our Director of Parks and Community Services, Jeff Watling, is going to be doing one of your presentations this afternoon, the role of parks and events in community recovery. And Jeff has brought some staff along. And so if you can just stay here so everybody can see you talking. Brian Bernston is with us.
Here, thanks for having us.
Perfect. Kathy Jones. Can't
Hello.
Oh, there we go. Amy Dukes.
Hi.
Hi, Amy. And Jared Gilmore.
Hi, I'm here.
Fantastic. Jeff has brought his whole team so that if you have questions, he has a lot under his one group there. If you have questions, they're going to be able to answer them for you today. So thank you all for coming as well. That's fantastic. Are there any public comments? Joanne, has anybody signed up to speak today?
No, there's no public comments today.
Okay, thank you. I think as we work our way through this process and we begin to have some action items, I'm hoping we do get some more comments. Reports. There are no reports for this meeting, so we're going to move right into our agenda items today. And the first one is the role of parks and events in community recovery. It's going to be presented by our Director of Parks and Community Services, Jeff Watling. And Jeff, you have the floor.
All right, Mayor, thank you. And thank you everybody for your service. As the Mayor said, Parks, we don't just travel as a posse just because. I did want to bring some staff and give them a chance to listen in and be available for any questions or discussion you might have. I thought what I'd do is provide a relatively quick and broad overview of our approach that we've taken through COVID and our planning efforts as we're looking at recovery, and then open it up to you for any questions you might have about specific programs and or event opportunities, or how our parks could help be a benefit to you in these recovery efforts. Like any service-driven business, we have had a lot of moving pieces and been seeking a lot of guidance and are relying on a lot of new information, new dates, and have really been living in this world of wanting to be agile and nimble. And that, I think, as I've worked very closely with the mayor and Wally, has really been a goal of ours, is to be smart, but also to be agile and nimble in not only how we've managed our public spaces through this pandemic, but now as we're looking into recovery. With that, certainly, what is in Parks and Community Services? Parks or trails? Oh, yes.
For 1 minute, I forgot to remind the group that if they have questions, if you could just go in the chat box. You don't have to write your question out. You just have to say, I have a question and I'd like to ask it now, or I have a question and I'd like to ask it at the end. That would be great. Sorry, Jeff.
Oh, no worries. Thanks. Yeah, so boy, Issaquah's parks, Issaquah's trails, Issaquah's public spaces play a big role in this community. I think we've known that pre-COVID, and in some ways this pandemic has really helped to confirm that and affirm that. And we know that to be the case as we head into recovery. What we manage for this community is a lot, as the mayor said. For the purpose of, I think, just this overview, I'm going to put what we do into 4 buckets and sort of talk about those buckets. The public system, our parks and trails, how we've managed that infrastructure through the system is one bucket. Our recreation facilities, so the community center, the pool, the senior center, the Pickering barn, I'd put in another bucket. Third would be events and programs, both events that we do and events that we support. Programs that we do and programs that we support as a third bucket. And then that last bucket is rentals. Rentals would be either renting a building or renting a park shelter or a portion of a park or a ball field. So really those 3 buckets make up and comprise a lot of different pieces of infrastructure that we manage. And I'd say all of those buckets, as we navigated into this pandemic and had to look at closures and how we manage those spaces, how we've been managing them through this pandemic, and now as we're looking at recovery, all of them have been had to be modified and changed and adjusted, and will continue to need to be modified and adjusted. And so pretty early on, we, rather than take a static type approach and say, let's make a unilateral decision about this facility or that program. Again, with guidance from the city administrator and the mayor, it became pretty clear that we wanted to be smart, to be as informed as we could, and be as agile as we could, not to be out in front of news, but to let public health and information inform us, and then allow us to be able to respond to that most current news and information. And so we took this approach really with all those facilities, and rather than thinking of a singular decision point, looking at rolling decision points. And I'll touch on those with all 4 of these, but rather than thinking, boy, let's make a decision now through the fall or through September. If we had to do that, if we had to make that, the decision given public health guidance right now would be no, we can't do it. And so this idea of rolling decision points, I think is hopefully going to allow us that ability to be agile and responsive as we move forward. So moving forward, I think I'll just touch on what each of these 4 buckets look like with that sort of rolling decision point approach. I'm not going to try and touch on every single program that we do within those 4 buckets, but at least provide some highlights and probably more the bigger offerings that you're all familiar with. And then again, give ample time for Q&A. So first, under that bucket of programs and events, because I think that's probably maybe most relevant to some of the discussion I've seen you've already had. This includes the farmers market. The farmers market is a program or service that is allowed in this current phase. So as we've really relied on the Safe Start plan and those phases that the governor has rolled out, The market is one that, with some really strict public health protocols, is something that we can do. And you've seen some of the bigger cities have done that. Jera Gilmore and her team have done a fantastic job of working with public health. We already have the go-ahead. We had to submit a pretty extensive plan, and we are going to be opening a modified farmers market next Saturday, June 6th. It's going to look a little different. It's going to feel a little different. It's going to feel somewhat like you're going to Costco, and that you might have to wait in line before you can come into the market, and we'll have to control access and egress. There'll be a smaller number of vendors focused really on ag, on produce, and on baked goods. Our vendors are really very, very excited to have the market back. So it's going to look a little smaller. It's going to look a little different, but it's certainly going to be nice to offer it and really see how the community is responding to the market. The plan, as we continue to get further guidance from public health through the summer and fall, would be expanding the market as public health guidance allows us to. So if that means we're sticking with a 35 to 40 vendor market through the season, we will. If it means we can expand a little bit more as the months go on, we'll be agile and prepared to do that. Another event area, and really a number of programs and events, is Concerts on the Green. We offer 8 of them. We do that with our partners at Kiwanis, David Harris, and some of our other longtime partners. We've not wanted and not felt, given the size and scale of those concerts, that we have to make the universal call right now. Given the Safe Start plan, though, it's very likely that concerts of that size, being in phase 4, is not going to be happening in July. So as we went with this rolling decision point process earlier this month, just last week, working with our partners, we've decided to cancel those July events, but hold off on a decision for the August concerts until the end of June. We want to have a chance to understand where we're at in the Safe Start plan and see where we are in terms of size and scale of gatherings that are allowed. Other events that we do and that we support, that other community partners do, we've encouraged them to take the same approach. If the event is of a size and scale that there's a nimbleness and an ability to wait and be informed 6-8 weeks out, we're working with groups and inviting them to think along those same lines. We want to have that opportunity if the community is able to gather in some size and scale towards the end of summer, August into fall, September. We'd love to see and have the opportunity to do that. Another big program area I want to touch on is summer day camps. We've just, I say new information is always coming out. There was 11-page report from Public Health that came out yesterday specific to summer day camps. So Kathy Jones and team have been digesting that and looking and making sure it's similar to some of the approaches we've already been planning for. Right now, we're planning on summer day camps being offered in a very modified fashion to what they historically were. Immensely popular program, provides that not only opportunity for kids and outlets and socialization for kids, but that daycare component that we know parents will be relying on and needing. So again, trying to be agile, trying to be able to respond to community need. And another bucket, our parks and our trails and our amenities, those too have been impacted. Obviously, as we're currently in phase 1, we have allowed our general park spaces and trails to remain accessible for the community as long as they use it in a smart, responsible way. It's great to see that for the most part through this whole pandemic, the community has responded well to that and understands the responsibility in using those spaces. We have closed our areas that are sort of higher congregation points. In phases 2 and 3, we'll be looking at, again, based on public health guidance, some of those amenities that will begin to be reopened just this weekend. With the guidance we've gotten about tennis courts, we are going to be reopening tennis courts in a modified way. So we see some of those closed amenities coming back online throughout the summer. That would include things like the picnic shelters, skate park, restrooms, etc. When it comes to rentals, that's been a very highly impacted area as guidance for gatherings has been limiting for really all services. So rentals, both private rentals at the barn and at shelters, as well as our ball fields and organized sports have all are not allowed right now. It's looking more like phase 3 as gatherings of 50 or less can happen. We really see that being the pivot point for being able to provide rentals and opportunities. We want to make sure as this community is getting creative and maybe thinking of new gatherings or new ideas or new ways to utilize the parks, that those rental opportunities are available as soon as they are allowed from a public health guidance standpoint. So we are prepared to be really creative in terms of how people might want to utilize our parks or rent park spaces to do gatherings that are allowed in those within those safe start parameters. Lastly, and probably just real quick, I'll touch on it, then we can jump into Q&A, is our recreation facilities themselves, the pool, the community center, the senior center. We've been continuing to offer lunches at the senior center on a to-go basis, but those buildings have been closed in terms of gathering spaces. We also see phase 3 being the window where we're preparing now for some type of modified opening during phase 3 with a reduced capacity, and then phase 4 transitioning to a fuller capacity, but probably still very much in a modified way. And I think we are prepared as we deliver all of these services, even as we get to phase 4, we're going to be doing it in some type of modified way as we move forward. So with that, we know the public spaces, your public spaces we steward, do play a key role in this community and in recovery. We're remaining as smart and as nimble and agile as we can be and what recovery looks like. Would love to support any creative ideas this community has. With that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor and Wally for Q&A or discussion. Thank you very much for letting us be here.
Thank you, Jeff. And for the group that's here today, can you let them know what roles your different staff play in terms of those 4 buckets of responsibilities that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So Jara Gilmore, I mentioned Jara oversees the Pickering Barn and the Farmers Market. Kathy Jones is our supervisor at the community center. So all things community center and concerts and day camps, etc. Brian Bernson's our recreation manager, sort of oversees all of our recreation services. And Amy Dukes is our arts coordinator, so oversees our arts program, both visual and performing arts, and all of the numerous grants that we do.
That is great. I am not seeing right now that anybody is posting that in the comment section that they'd like to ask a question, but while you are queuing up.
There is a question
Okay.
from one of your members.
Oh, let's see.
I think it came through to Joanne. So let's see.
that's
Ron, did you have a question?
Yeah, so Jeff, at the for farmers market and our other entertainment venues, what is the strategy for dealing with opposition to using face masks?
Well, I think we take the approach that King County ordinance has given us, right? And that we are strongly urging and asking that folks use face coverings. But at the same time, we're not going to turn it into a civil offense.
And I see Sashi also has a question or a comment.
Yeah, a comment and a question. The comment is, I like the idea that you're opening. It's very good for the community, but how are we going to monitor new cases? Will public health be doing it? And I recommend it should be done every week because the incubation period is anything from 1.5 days to 27 days or so. And as soon as we see something, we should retract back. And yes, I think face masks, I don't know if it's compulsory, that would be good because this is an infection which if one has, others are affected too. So we all should be careful about it.
So Jeff, if it's okay with you, I'd like to provide a little information to the group on Shashi's question, because it's a really good one. So the city itself does not have a health department. King County Health Department is our health department. New cases is sort of a lagging indicator of when you have an issue. So we know that every 2 weeks, whatever information is coming out of public health at that point is reflective of changes in behavior from 2 weeks earlier, or maybe 3 weeks earlier. So they do collect the information, public health, and they update it. But as we start to reopen, there will be this 2-week lag where we will not have data that actually tells us what the health impacts are right away. Not sure if that answers your question or not, Shashi.
Yeah, I think if public health is, if King County Health of Department is doing, they should do it. And as soon as there's, and also I was thinking we should add contact tracing. I thought I can talk about it later because I know that state of Washington is employing around 13,000 contact tracers. And I have gone to the website of Johns Hopkins and also CDC. They give free training. But at Johns Hopkins, I had a little dilemma because some questions were like, how much, we have to buy the certificate. So I didn't know whether that's free, but enrollment was free. Yesterday, they started their classes. It's only 5 hours. Qualification required is only high school pass. And I did the calculation that our city with a population of 40,000 would require only 40 contact tracers to finish the contract, at least the one call per household in 2 weeks. So we should give some thought about it. And my observation is King County is pretty big county, but we have almost everything around 50% of the Washington state. The cases, the deaths, and although our population is only around 1/4 or 1/3 of the total population of Washington state. So I think even compared to Bellevue, a number of deaths per 100,000 is much more. So even if numbers look different, I think percentages or some kind of that parameter is good. So I think we should be careful about our opening. And I was thinking, are we really in phase 1 or still in phase 0? Or should we make it a little more stricter? Because I know if we open it faster, we may have more trouble later. If we have more patients now, we could be a role model for other cities.
Yes, thank you for that. So Dow Constantine did an update yesterday with the mayors east of Seattle. So the City of Seattle and King County had a meeting with the governor's office the day before, and then King County Health and the executive had a meeting with the mayors yesterday. And the contact tracers are all being hired through public health agencies and not through cities. So King County and the state have hired the contact tracers, and they're doing a bit of a dance between how much help King County gets or not. So right now, with the contact tracing, has been in place for a month. They are doing about 20 to 30% of the King County contact tracing with King County tracers, and 70, 80% of it is being done by state contact tracers. They're hoping as they move through the pilot stage that they will then be able, the amount of tracers that the state has will be able to completely take over the King County piece. So yes, they're working on it. I was surprised to hear they've already been doing it for a month, so that's great. They do have enough positions filled to do the tracing they believe they need to do for us. So it's in place. I believe it's either the end of this week or early next week, they're going to roll out some of the technology tools that they're going to use to help us do it. But like I said, it's a lagging indicator. It's one that you don't know the real impact until about 2 weeks after, because that virus is out there doing its thing, and then you see it. So thank you for that. I am going to go to, let's see, I think Mike Brennan is next up, and then City Administrator Bob Quitz would like to make a comment. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a quick question for Jeff. So you were talking about the need to be agile and kind of creative in the way that you're using park facilities. And so maybe it's a two-part question. One is, are there different programs that the city is contemplating or has put in place that are specifically responsive to kind of the changed environment we're dealing with regard to the COVID impacts? And then secondly, you mentioned that you want to be creative in how the parks facilities are used and are open to ideas coming from the community and or maybe community organizations. And the question is, do they know that? Do they know that they can, contact the Parks Department and maybe use parks facilities differently than they may have thought in the past, just because of past restrictions? So just kind of a two-part question.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark, for the question. In terms of new programs for us, I think we are yes and no. How's that? We like many other departments, as we've had to navigate this, we've had budget reductions and pretty sizable staffing reductions. So as we're reopening our facilities, we're reopening with smaller staff, unfortunately. So that doesn't restrict us from offering new stuff. I think we're always looking for new or modified ways to offer stuff, but we're going to be doing it in a reduced staffing fashion. So that kind of leads to your second point of, I think we're always reaching out for community partners. We will, I think, continue to do that, whether it's Chamber and DIA and our partners there, or whether it's our community partners or neighborhood partners. I'd want to be careful. I love creativity, and in Parks and Recreation and Community Services, we're all about creativity. I don't know that we're looking to totally reinvent how parks are used. I think we're open to how events and activities that again are in alignment and make sense within that public space and don't detract from that public space. Yeah, I think we'll work with our social media folks and our neighborhood folks and everyone else to continue to make sure that's known, that those spaces are available, and our business partners as well.
Mike, does that answer your question?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that.
Thank you. So I made a mistake. Next up actually is Marlene, and Marlene has a comment and a question. Marlene.
Hi, everybody. First of all, for Jeff, Brian, and team, thank you guys for the communication that's been all over the parks and the trailheads. I think that was really well done, as well as sort of cordoning off the areas so it was clear to us what was and wasn't available. So someone who uses the parks a lot with the kiddos, I've appreciated that. So thank you. I have a couple of comments or questions, and one was already discussed briefly around masks. And I would say specifically would be curious around with the farmers market, is there similar, you mentioned Costco as an example, is there a possibility of us requiring masks for some of these optional public events, and would we want to go that far? I think that's just something that I'd be interested in hearing about. And then before you answer them, yes.
Let's take that question first. Let's give Jeff that first.
And you know what? Jara, if you're still there, I know you've worked very closely with King County Public Health. They are our public health agency, and we have very strict protocols specific to the market in terms of what face covering requirements look like. So, Jara, do you want to speak to that related to the market?
Yeah, at this time, we're highly suggesting that all vendors, shoppers, and farmers market staff who can wear a mask should wear a mask. And we will have lots of signage visually reminding people, and we have doubled our staff on site as well. who will be working the farmers market because we have a lot more monitoring that we need to do. And we're not going to be doing any on-site enforcing, just unless it becomes absolutely required and illegal to not wear a mask. If the governor states that and enhances that, then we would follow along. But at this point, we're strictly highly recommending, and we're not looking to get into individual battles with people about it, or to get into any enforcement.
And that's based on guidance from public health, is that right, Tara?
Yeah, yes, it is.
And just to add on to what Jara said, for a lot of what the city has been doing, Jeff's work and other folks' work, is we've been taking our direction from the governor's office. Marlene, you had more questions.
My other one is maybe more of a idea if you're welcoming them and as it relates to the kids camps, if those are going forward. I know those camps are hard to get into, as I know my 8 o'clock start time and multiple computers. So one of the things I was just curious about is if you're looking to reduce the number of campers, could we think about ensuring that the essential workers or people that have to go in are the ones that are kind of keeping those slots? And so whether it's voluntary for people who are already in to say, would you give up your spot to essential workers? Or if there's just some sort of way to bridge that gap in the summer program would just be something that I've been thinking about.
Appreciate that.
That one sounds like it needs some more conversation. I think we should come back with an answer on that. I know there is daycare set up for essential workers, but that's a really great question, Marlene. So I think staff and I will come back to you with something like that. I like that. Did you have additional question, Marlene?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to let the city administrator pop in for a second. He had a comment he wanted to make. Wally?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Pauly. Regarding the public health questions that we had, as we are looking at future meetings of this recovery task force, we've invited staff from King County Public Health to join us. And at this point, I believe they'll be coming not to the next meeting, which is the 10th, but to the meeting, which would, or obviously the 11th, but the meeting on June 25th. So we've asked senior members of the King County Health Department to come and join us. They've indicated they can do that at the end of June. So as the mayor said, I think there's still a lot of additional work that's being done with setting up the contact tracing, the testing. Our sense is that there'll be a lot more known as June progresses. And so we'll have representatives from King County Health at this meeting at the end of June. The other piece regarding parks, again, we're kind of doing a lot of this with one hand tied behind our back, not knowing when phase 2 will begin. And so I think we're reluctant to think too far ahead, not knowing what the circumstances will be with phase 2, what the timing of phase 2 will be. The discussions that this group had at its last meeting on economic development about making park space available for businesses is something where we've been pursuing since that meeting. So there are some options that are being looked at, being investigated. But again, until we have a better sense of timing, I think we're a little reluctant to even move forward with them because we really don't know if we could offer the use of some of these parks, for example, until we get some additional guidance from the governor. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, City Administrator. The last question I have is from Jason. So while Jason is asking his question, if you have some additional ones for Jeff or his team, please just let me know in the chat column. Jason, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm not sure who this can go to, but basically, I'm wondering, because of the budget constraints and the financial impact, what is the annual budget deficit from having these 4 buckets closed? So whether it's the amenities, whether it's the events, the rentals, what's the annual budget look like when we're having a good year? And I know it might be hard to kind of figure out exactly where we're at right now with the coronavirus, but how much has it already impacted this year? Because I'm wondering about the financial impact on the city.
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe Jeff had broken things down by bucket. Maybe he and his team can just give you a ballpark number.
Ballpark would be great.
Yeah, perfect number. But just to give you a sense of the scale that we're talking about. So Jeff, how would you like to break that question down?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Lots of details. sticking it at a sort of a macro scale, the Parks and Community Services Department brings in about $3 million a year in self-generated revenue. So that's revenue off of field rentals, room rentals, programs, camps, sort of all of the above, about $3 million a year. As we went through and worked with administration and finance on these budget reductions, and our sort of staffing reductions and operational reductions, those revenues were part of the picture. So as we were looking at reducing expenses, we were also keeping in mind, Jason, what's the revenue impact going to be, right? What's the revenue loss going to be? And as we try and navigate this amended or adjusted 2020 budget, we're sort of working with that lost revenue picture in mind, if that makes sense. I mean, we in Parks and Recreation with self-generated revenue are always working towards sort of that net operating cost, right? I think until we know when we're reopening, at $3 million a year, we're not going to make $3 million a year this year, but we're also making bigger and had to make some really hard expenditure reductions and staffing reductions that are bigger than that revenue loss to get to that new net operating number. Does that make sense?
Well, let me add one thing. Jeff, is it fair to say that the tax dollars that the city receives through its various sources, to some degree, to some percentage, do subsidize? You collect your fees for all the rentals and programs, but you don't cover your costs. In most Parks and Recreation Department, there is a subsidy that comes along.
Correct. Absolutely right. Yeah, there is, this is public infrastructure. There is a subsidy of some level. From my experience in working with other cities and seeing other cities, $3 million a year of self-generated revenue for the department that's a pretty strong engine. And it really, I'd say it helps those general fund dollars, as the mayor says, it helps that subsidy get more done by generating that much revenue.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jason, did that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most part, like I said, that's my concern when we talk about contract tracing, things like that. That really should be left up to the departments, King County and Health, because again, the city's made some painful cuts, and I know they have. So the things that we can put on the state and the county, better to let them do it than Issaquah. And even things like when we're talking about economic recovery, we already are helping the landlords and the tenants. I think the best way we're going to be able to help local businesses isn't by subsidizing them. It's one, by getting out of their way. They're going to do whatever's in their best financial health. But it's going to be things like, buy local campaigns. It's not going to necessarily be by subsidizing small businesses because, again, the city's in dire straits too. So
thanks. That's a point well made. Cities are working really hard to get their voices heard during this time because some of the very essential community services that we provide, we've made cuts in, and so it's difficult. And this is an opportunity for this group. This is why this group is so diverse, is to help us figure out the creative ways to help, because we cannot just throw money at things. We don't have the money, but we can rethink the way we do things. And so that's a really, really great question. I have Nina up next for a question.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Nina Milligan. Jeff, or whoever, I think it might be you, it might be Brian. I just wanted to ask about construction projects planned for the year and what impact the COVID emergency has had on those.
Yeah, do you have a specific project in mind? Or are you thinking more just park capital projects?
Yeah, in general, because I think for the task force, others might be interested. I just was reminded in my mind that Issaquah Highlands had a couple projects that we had for 2020 scheduled, and they are outdoors, but do you get to do them? And just generally speaking.
Yeah, no, really good question, Nina. Thank you. COVID is having an impact on our park capital program, twofold. As we had to make those hard financial reductions to the general fund, that's impacted some of our capital projects that had general fund support. One of our Staffing reductions was in park planning as well. So our park planning staff is reduced 50%. So that will limit our ability to get some of those projects done. We're in the midst of updating our work plan. I think it's scheduled June 9th, I believe. City Council is going to be having a conversation around sort of work plan impacts related to COVID. Yeah, I'd say pretty much every capital project in some way, shape, or form has been delayed because of this. We have a number of projects that were really at key public engagement points that we've, I think for a number of reasons, paused that public engagement, and we're not going to proceed with that capital project until we get that public engagement touch. And so, yeah, we remain committed to doing them, but this has certainly had an impact on those programs and projects.
Thank you for the question, Nina. Did you get your answer?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff.
I also wanted Nina, if you could take about 30 seconds. I'm not sure that everybody that's on here recognizes that one of our largest homeowners associations is up in the Highlands, and that some of the park space and programming up there is actually managed by the Highlands versus the city. So I understood your question was some Highlands projects aren't going to happen from your group, and in conjunction there are some city projects.
Yeah, I was top of mind was the Bike Skills Park, which is for the entire city, but happens to be scheduled to be in Central Park in Issaquah Highlands, and that's something we've been trying to do for a couple of years and haven't gotten it done. And then there were maintenance and other things at Central Park, which is used region from all the city and the region. But I know we had other things about bark parks in town and other projects that we really wanted to get to. And so I was thinking of those. We do have parks in Issaquah Highlands that are owned and managed by the homeowners association, and they follow the same guidance that the city does in as far as use. So when the city has park structures taped off for not use, like playgrounds, we do that too with the Issaquah Highlands parks. And so we're just the same as you in following your lead as you follow King County. And then as far as events and such are concerned, we are very similar, following your lead in trying to put off decisions that we don't have to make right away. But we did make a decision about Highlands Day and had to cancel it because of so much preparatory work that's done earlier in the COVID season that made it impossible for us to do the preparatory work. So Highlands Day is one thing that came off our calendar, but we're putting other things on the calendar that, as we understand the COVID restrictions, the things we can do, we will do.
That's great. Thank you for that, because you do put on a lot of community events up there as well. And there's confusion over is the city doing that or Highlands, and a lot of great events from Highlands. We have time for one additional question right now. That doesn't mean that if you've thought of something or you go to sleep tonight, wake up tomorrow, you have another question, send it in. Sometimes it's when you go away that you really start to think about what it is that you wanted to ask. But I am going to go to Mike Brennan for the last question.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll try to make it quick. So I think City Administrator Bobkowitz already talked about exploring the use of city properties for dealing with some of the issues that the small businesses are having. But maybe Jeff, you can speak to this. When it comes to expanding the activities, which could be commercial activities on city parks properties, can you speak a little bit about kind of the barriers and opportunities that you've been thinking about as you've explored that? Or maybe you can also say, well, it's too early, we're still working on it, but it would be interesting to hear just the current thinking about that, because it could be a revenue generating opportunity as well.
Yeah, it is early, Mike, but I'd say in general, anytime, whether it's COVID recovery or just general management of public space, anytime there's a private or commercial use, at least I think it's very welcome. And the mechanism usually that's in place when you have a private entity benefiting from that public space, there's typically either concessionaires agreement or there's some type of an agreement to make sure that that public space is being, in a way, also being compensated for that commercial use or private use. And so, yeah, there's not a lot of direct examples here in Issaquah, but there's a lot of examples in park systems all around us of those type of public-private partnerships, again, done in a smart way that doesn't distract from the public use or detract from the public use, they can be real win-wins and benefits.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm not seeing any more questions, so thank you all for that. Thank you, Jeff, and your team. It is great. The next item on our agenda this evening is Work Plan Priority Survey results. And I'm going to open this up with Wally Bobkowitz, our city administrator, and Joanne Biscara, the executive assistant.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the task force. We took the notes from your first two meetings, put them together, and created a survey to kind of get your sense of priority. And our hope for the remainder of the meeting today is to share with you what we heard from you, get your confirmation that the issues are captured and the priorities are generally where you'd like them to be. So that we can, from a city staff perspective, move forward and start working on some of these and be able to report back. And then also talk about how we can continue to have your feedback participation as we move forward with this. So Joanne Biscara she did the survey, she put together the results, and I'm going to let her walk through a PowerPoint, which was in your packet, talking about what we heard from the task force members. Joanne?
Thank you, Administrator Bobkowitz. So Joanne Biscara here, Executive Assistant in the Mayor's Office. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pull up, give me just a moment, and pull up the results. And okay, I think, can somebody confirm that you can see?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you. So as Administrator Bobkowitz said, we took the results, or we took all of the information you gave us in the brainstorming sessions and put them into this survey. And we'll just jump right in. This was in the agenda packet. Each of the priority areas, as you ranked, were weighted, and when they averaged out, this is how it all shook out, with economic recovery landing as your top priority. I will mention that you guys are very diverse. It was really all over the map. So it was good to see such a great diverse group of passion in all of these areas. The economic recovery was first, communications second, community health third, human services, post-recovery planning, and then in community engagement. So after you ranked the top areas of focus, we then asked you to rank the different items or concepts that you all identified within each topic area. So this slide and the next 5 slides in the same order identify then how it came out for each topic within, or each item within the different areas of focus. So under economic recovery, I won't read them all, but just the top 3, obviously big focus and big agreement on a buy local campaign, using parks and streets and finding creative ways to help the restaurants with their seating limitations, and then helping to provide consistent signage for the businesses and stores in the area. For communications, the top were developing the messaging for what restaurants can expect as they come back online, more sharing with the city government plans, and helping or providing better public health messaging to the community. Third priority was community health, coronavirus and antibiotic testing sites with the central repositories for PPE. Within human services, the top priorities were to focus on the vulnerable populations, giving landlord and tenants more assistance, and then also providing and focusing on mental health resources for the community. Under post-recovery, there were only 2, but we prioritized that to identify the opportunities for challenge and then aim for a better new normal. And last but not least was community engagement. This has a lot of items under it. Coming in first was to develop new ways to get people back out feeling safe in the community, assisting more with signage that kind of was touched on the first one as well, and then collaborating with our other cities nearby. So that is it, and I will hand it back over to Administrator Bobkowitz to talk about the next steps with this work plan.
Thanks, Joanne. Really appreciate all your good work on this. So, Mayor Pauly, members of the task force, we'd like, I guess, first just to get general comments. Does this seem right? Did we capture all of the major themes that were raised? Is there anything that is missing? So I think, Mayor, perhaps if anyone has any questions or comments, that would really be the first area we'd like to talk about.
Oh, thank you, Administrator Bobkowitz. I think what I'm going to do is a little bit of a round robin since we have some time on with this item. And there are a few folks today who haven't had a chance to comment, so I'm just going to start with them. You don't have to comment, but if you have any comments that you want to share, please feel free to join in. So Marisol, is there any comments or questions you have about the work plan?
I have no comments. I have it's a question. I can make it right now. Yes. It's about face mask and coverage. I do think that a lot of people feel hesitant about getting any face masks because it's better to get them, and I don't know if there's a way or if there's any a way to, I don't know, locally offer some sort of masks or I don't know. I mean, I have been volunteering at the food bank, and every time anybody drives through, they get a face mask. And I will say that everybody is taking them because it's really hard for people to get them. If you don't have a sewing machine, you don't get them. And it's hard to get them on the store. So I don't know. I'm thinking about that, just about general public and how
everything we're doing,
yeah, and how easy it is for people to get a face mask because, it's being talked a lot about it.
That is great. City Administrator Bobkowitz, I know that right now with most of our offices closed, we don't have a lot of contact with the public. However, the court is possibly opening next week, I think June 2nd or 3rd. I'm not sure the date that our administrator had said. And we are going to be having face masks at that location to offer to those that are coming for court services that don't have a face mask and want it. What about expanding that broader in the community?
Certainly. We can do that. I think the farmers market may be an excellent opportunity to do that because, I think we have to balance the importance of having the mask. We also don't want to create new events where, that creates all other issues. So I think, Marisol, thank you for the issue. We can look to see what we can do in the next week as far as making face masks available at the farmers market, make the community know that's available, and we can look for additional sources as well.
That's a great comment, Marisol. Thank you very much. Trish, I was going to check in with you, and let me make sure you're still on. Trish is still on. Do you want to take yourself off mute, and do you have any comments or questions? Not sure that Trish is still there. I will come back. Grace, I also had you on my list to check in and see if you had any comments or questions on what you've heard today.
I don't have any comments or questions so far.
Thank you, Grace. And Janine, I forgot to mention it at 4:05, so just so that the clerk who is making sure we have attendance, Janine joined the meeting at about 4:05. So Janine, did you have any comments or questions for us today?
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. I don't have any questions. I think the work plan, we've got a number of things to tackle. I thought it was very comprehensive, and I think we're in a pretty good place. So I don't have anything further to add. Thank you.
That is great. And maybe we'll just continue around the room, and I'll go to Shashi now and get comments or questions on the work plan.
Yeah, thank you. I have one question. How many participants took part in the survey? Because when I gave the survey, only 3 had done, and I think it was sent to all of us, maybe 15 of us or more, maybe. So that was my first question. And well, I felt something when I looked at the survey things. I said, wow, I have only two things in mind. Number one, community health, and then comes wealth. So that's for me, that's the priority. And everything else is all equally good, everything excellent. But for me, health comes first. And because it's an infection, it's a public infection, I think we should give weightage to that. And I'm sure it will happen testing, contact tracing, and about masks. I'm very glad about her speaking about it because I understand that food bank requires masks and people who come there to get things probably can't make it or something like that. But I had been wanting to give some things to the food bank and they don't take that, it seems. Only thing they take is money. And for me, I would like to give things. And I may give a lot of clothes, which they can tear off. And I think making a mask is something we can do at household, just a rectangle piece and few layers, and do make two slits, not even do any sewing, nothing, and put around this, or maybe with hand sewing and little we can manage. So I think making masks should be very, very easy. Every family can do for their own, and washable clothes. They have mentioned so many times on Como 4 and other news channels how to do. Take a swimming suit for outer layer, cotton for the inner layer that touches our skin. So masks should actually not be a problem. We should not go for professional with the strings and putting, important thing is the purpose it serves, that we want to just block and not give our infection aerosols to others and block others aerosols to us. It's not doing 100% job, but something better than nothing. So those are the two things. So
okay, thank you, Sashi. There's several things in there I'd like to kind of follow up on. Because when Joanne presented the survey results, which she has put in the comments box, 13 responded to the survey, so that's excellent. What we're finding is that there may be a point in this process where we have different groups work on different things. And so that definitely, Joanne is right, the interest level crossed everything. So that was good. Also, the food bank, I know at this point in time, they are, with their current operation, unable under current health rules to take any donations, but they are expecting that to change. And my understanding, and Jeff may have better information, I believe Corey, the executive director, said within the next couple of weeks, depending on protocols, that they may be able to start actually accepting donations again. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Also on the face mask piece, Shashi, I think what we want to do is we want to make sure that those that would like to have a face mask have it. We recognize in the community there are some people for different health reasons cannot wear a face mask, and we know that, but we also know the demand is really high. So I'm going to go back to City Administrator for a second. Did we not have a local story recently? I believe it was the Sammamish High School students who've been making masks, and I don't know exactly where they're set up and giving them out, but they got some local press recently, and I thought it was amazing.
Sure. And Mayor, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Now we can.
All right. We can certainly, there have been lots of community organizations doing that. There are donations that are being made. Certainly the fire district has received them. I think the comment that we'll take away from this is, what can we do to make sure Issaquah residents are aware of what's out there? And again, I think we can use the farmers market a week from Saturday as a good point for that. There's going to be a lot more outside activities, I think, over the next several weeks. And I think we just need to make sure that at each of these events that there's a supply available for people to get. And then as we open up City Hall and other city facilities, it just have those available if people need them. So that's great. We'll work on that.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to move on to Marlene. Marlene, did you have any comments or questions on the work plan?
I think it's looking great. I have just a comment regarding this mask conversation. I know, at least for my mom and a lot of her friends who are in their 70s, they are really enjoying making masks to help people out. And I'm curious with the senior center if there would be, a potential for a drive where people could donate either fabric or money for fabric, and then sort of have that as a takeaway if they're picking up food or whatever, but would like to help by making masks. It just might be both kind of a community engagement moment, helping people feel like they're helping, and help people get masks. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Marlene, that's excellent. I think one of the things I want to do with our community is we're not just going to have masks for a few months. We're going to have masks for quite a while. And the community has expressed an interest in how they can help. And so when we're allowed to do things like accept donations, I think community projects like that would be wonderful. I think that's great. Thank you for that suggestion. I'm going to check in with Jason.
All right. Well, thank you again. I'm kind of like Washashi as far as I think the whole work plan was really well done, well-rounded. I think everyone got the opportunity to put things in there that they wanted to do. I'm actually kind of reverse with Shashi, meaning I think the economic recovery is going to be more important because I think people will follow their own health and they're going to follow things like communications more from Como and Q13 and other areas necessarily than from us. Although I do think one thing which might get a little bit more community engagement is maybe having the mayor do a PSA and air it on radio or Q13 during the local news channels and just saying, hey, check out ICGTV. I don't know if there's any type of competitive where you can't do that, but it might be good for the summer months where people can get Issaquah information right there on our TV channel. And then as far as the masks and kind of the post-recovery, I don't know if this is feasible, but I did think about it. Having maybe Purell stations, I think it'd probably be too expensive to have hand washing stations along the street where people walk that kind of look like the light posts. That's probably way too expensive. It'd probably get vandalized. But it'd be pretty simple, like the Arcos, where you could have a Purell station where people walking by can Purell their hands before they go into stores, things like that. And this might be a little futuristic, but maybe it's coming. It's something like a pop or gumball machine for face masks. Could put in like $1 and save like 3 masks. I don't, again, probably not in the offing for a while, but it could be something in the post-recovery where, again, people, if there's a Purell station right there on the light post, they would use it and hopefully it wouldn't get vandalized. So maybe those things for post-recovery. Otherwise, a great plan, and enjoy the engagement from all of you guys.
You guys are great. I love this out of the box thinking, but I have a caveat on doing videos. If some of the Issaquah Recovery Task Folk members will do them with me, then I'll do videos. That is excellent. Thank you. I see Saikat's on now, and I didn't realize he joined the meeting. And Saikat, if you want to turn off mute, I'm not sure how much you've seen or if you have any questions or comments for Dave. So we'll just check in with you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm sorry I had a important work thing, so I was a little late. No, I don't have any questions or comments really.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to check in with Ron.
I'm happy to hold the camera for you when you're doing the video.
No, you got to be on the other side of the camera. You know that.
No, I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Okay. Nina, questions and comments on the work plan?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is Nina Milligan. I have a question, and I'm sorry to ask this question. I feel like an idiot. I should already know this. What is the term of the recovery that we're talking about? Because when I'm looking at this work plan and how these priorities are set up, when would we be moving to another thing? And did I miss that? Can you do that? And then I have another question after that.
Sure. I'm going to hand it back to the city administrator.
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I think there is the recovery. I think what we're looking at is really a kind of a what do we do in the next 3-6 months period? You know, the recovery task force. I don't know that we have a specific term that we've identified for the task force and the work that it's doing. One of the reasons the mayor decided to do the recovery task force was rather than trying to reconvene all of the city's boards and commissions, the recovery task force can kind of serve multiple roles. There will be a time when we need the city's boards and commissions to reactivate. So I think that the time frame we're looking at with the work plan right now is primarily probably the next 3-6 months. And I think that once we get through that, we will likely need to revisit it. You know, it becomes more a restoration plan, and what is then that new normal look like, and there's probably other planning processes that'll be needed for that. But I would think what we presented to you today is a 3-6 month plan, probably through the end of the year. I think that's probably the easiest way to describe it.
Thank you. Nina, next question.
I'm arguing with the
Yay!
priority list, but the if I knew that these were the things that we were doing immediately, but the other things lower on the list were only lower because you would not do them in the first 3 months, but you might prioritize them they might be a higher priority for another time in the recovery, such as helping with the local employment opportunities. Certainly that might not be the first thing out of the gun that we're doing. We're trying to get our current businesses open, and the ones that have been closed and all that stuff is time. But it didn't, to me, I just was thinking about, is there a phase 1 of the recovery in Issaquah and another phase later where we can employ these other ideas that fell down lower on the list?
That's
so
a
that's
great
just
comment.
kind of a comment. And then the other comment I wanted to make, or sort of a question, is under community engagement. It was fuzzy to me what we meant by the word develop, and develop ways for the people to get out in this community safely. And to something that Jeff said earlier, the city staff is very lean, and the word develop is really big. And I wondered if we wanted to tighten that up a little bit to be realistic about the resources that the city has available to do this stuff. That was just another observation.
That is a great comment. Thank you very much. Did you have any more comments or questions?
Nope. Done.
Thank you, Nina. I'm going to check back in with Stephanie, because when I went through my first list of who I hadn't heard from today, I missed Stephanie, and I'm not sure if I've got a couple screens going here, but Stephanie, come on in, and any comments or questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We, as a restaurant group, have a couple questions. I think that the work plan looks great. I think that as a city, it looks like we have a pretty cohesive cover on kind of every angle that we want to hit. But can we put a note to be looking at specific semi-permanent options for restaurants or services that can be in our parking lot if the property manager okays it? Like, can we put, pop-up tents that could maybe be out for it's okay to leave them up at night, and we'll just pull tables and chairs in, putting extra consideration for sidewalk seating that may not have been used before, as long as people can safely get around. And then that curbside signage just for any available street side parking that could be used as, a second thoroughfare for services to drop off items, and even retail, if they can have a pull up in front of the retail. I think that's super helpful. I appreciate that the city wants to be smart and safe, and I think that there's a lot of good ideas. And also, to just touch on what Jason was talking about, if we were to do a video or Facebook post or something, I do think to send a blast to local news stations is probably, that's genius, because it helps everybody. It's not just Issaquah, it's very community centric, and this is how we're assuming that we're going to operate and how it's going to work best for everyone, but to just kind of share the wealth of that information from collaboration from everybody downtown, or maybe just on Front Street, however we want to look at it. And lastly, the dine out option, where maybe we shut down Front and Sunset for one evening. Just a quick comment about that. I think it would be a great way to kind of reopen into phase 2 as maybe just a one-off, as opposed to choking up the city once a month in the summertime. I think it would be a really great way to kind of invite the community out to support local business, and that could be that start of the first push, and then we can kind of filter through and send from there. But that's basically everything from us. I appreciate it.
Stephanie, fantastic. I'm a person who's always talking about doing a pilot. Let's try one first. And so I think that's a great idea. And also hearing from the business community, I think it's a big commitment to say that, this is the new normal for 6 months. I think working our way into something is a good idea. I did have a comment for Administrator Bobkowitz I'd like him to comment on, and that is that I believe the intent of this group and of me personally as the mayor is that it's both the public and private spaces that we use for expansion and pickup. And so what is the difference, Wally, between a private, where Sunset is, they're within their own strip mall and they have their own parking and it's all private. What would be would that feel different than if we were freeing up city parking spots and city sidewalks? Is that a different process or?
I think it would be only because we require of those centers to have a certain amount of parking. And so if that parking was taken out of commission, we would have to deal with whatever appropriate changes to law we might need to have or create some sort of special permit to allow for that. I think right now, if there's a sidewalk sale and it's, a Saturday and Sunday a few times a year, for a few hours, then that's not a big deal.
Right.
I think what she was saying is if this was going to be something that was more semi-permanent, then we would have to address the reduction in parking spaces. So,
yeah.
But I think the message you should be hearing from us is everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table.
There is no answer at this point to anything. We just have to figure it out and work through it. And our plan is to come back to the task force at your next meeting in 2 weeks and talk more. We are working very diligently with city staff, with our what we call our vision partners, the economic development organizations around Issaquah, and we're going to come back in 2 weeks and tell you what we think makes sense in our mind to move forward and start during the month of June. So we'll address many of the things that have been raised at the next meeting.
That's fantastic. I mean, my hope is that this is an opportunity for us to not let process get in the way of doing these things we want to do and making sure that they don't put another financial burden on an organization. So I just really want to find these things that we can do that are easier and at no cost to businesses to help them thrive. So thanks for that. That's a good answer. I just wanted to go back and give Janine a chance. I'm not sure if you had another question or comment you'd like to share.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. Was that for me? Did you say Janine? I just wanted to, okay. I actually, it was another comment about the mask and I since retracted it, but I'll bring it up. There was a lot of good comments around getting the mask or being creative about making masks. And I love how we can bring a couple of the priorities on our work back plan together. So there's the health aspect and then there's the community engagement. So where we have opportunities where we're having community events, maybe there can be a table or an area where people are coming together to actually make the masks. And again, we're going to need them for a long time. So as we're planning out these activities, maybe that's something that we can keep in mind as well. So just a thought there.
That is a great comment. Thank you very much. Shashi, you would like to make a comment for the group?
Yeah, about the restaurant, I understand the food industry is very, very important. I'm missing it too. I have a suggestion about it. I like the idea. We talked about the pilot program last time. When customers come, it would be very nice if we can collect some information, but could be made compulsory. They have to give some information that in case something happens, we can go back, contact, and pinpoint where the problem started. Because if we remain in a cloud, it could be very harmful to the industry in general. So my only suggestion is that if we do that, we will narrow our search and what we need to close down or open more or whatever. Just to be careful. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashi. There was, the governor has had a couple of different versions of it. I think his very first version that came out on guidance for restaurants required, and now it is not required. It is suggested. And so, I'm really interested. I mean, my experiences in the restaurants that I've been going to in town for takeout have been very good. I've seen good practices, painted lines, hand sanitizer, good control. And I'm just hoping that we're bringing forward all that good intent into the next one too, because it's been said a couple times is that every cities are pretty nervous about becoming the pandemic police because we're trying to do everything to encourage good behavior without becoming the pandemic police. But thank you, that is an excellent comment. I am not seeing anything in the chat box, so I'd like to just go back to Wally for a second and see if there's anything else you want to add or talk about what's coming up. Oh, I'm seeing some pointing.
Just to thank you for the feedback. We'll continue to move forward with the issues that are listed, and we'll be bringing back updates to the task force. As I mentioned, our plan for the next meeting is to bring back our economic development city staff as well as our partners to report on the work that they've been doing and get some feedback from you on that. And then the meeting 2 weeks after that, we've asked representatives from King County Health to come and talk about some of the health issues that have been raised. So that is kind of our window. Appreciate the discussion about the masks. We'll look at that. The governor has been making pronouncements every day. There may be additional direction on masks. So that's something we'll look at. We have been hearing from members of the community who are going into stores concerned that everyone's not wearing masks. Again, it's not a requirement. That may change. So again, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the task force, for your feedback.
And I set you up, Wally. You are not the last one to speak because Stephanie has another comment. So I'm inviting Stephanie back into the conversation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just two quick comments. The first comment is the last information that we got from Governor was that restaurants are not required to trace, but it's suggested that we keep a list if guests want to freely offer information. And just a side note, every guest that I've spoken to so far wants nothing to do with that list. So we're kind of in a catch-22 in that it's great that we're not required to ask for it, but it sounds like we're going to get a lot of pushback initially. So it's kind of nice that we've been a little let off the hook. I'm not afraid to do it. I just don't want to put guests in a weird situation. And then lastly, as far as outdoor seating, parking lots, whatever that could look like for semi-permanent structures, if it's that big of an, or if we get to an impasse, I think most restaurants would be completely okay if we could do Thursday through Saturday, just account for our busiest times of the week. And maybe through Sunday afternoon, we kind of adjust that way or try it for a couple weeks and see. I completely understand parking is always going to be an issue, especially in Old Town. But I think those concessions, especially with being at 50% capacity until we hit phase 3, those are the kind of concessions that retail and service are really going to be looking for. Anywhere that we can meet in the middle is going to make a huge difference. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, Stephanie. Very good points, both of those. And thanks for providing that anecdotal information, because I really didn't know community's willingness to provide that information or not. I'm on the same page as Shashi. I think it's very important. I think we'll find out 2 weeks later whether they're reopening. We'll see it in other data. So very interesting. I don't see any other. Oh, no, I do. Trish, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, my session died right when we began the round robin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so I had to reboot and I got back in when Jason was making his comments. But so I might be addressing things that have already been addressed, but I do have a comment because we were very enthusiastic about encouraging reservations only when we started to have the restaurants seat inside. So when we take a reservation, we're going to have a person's name and a telephone number. So that's a way of having a quasi contact tracing list without having to ask people when they walk in the door if we're asking everybody to make reservations. So what do you think, Stephanie?
That's a great question for Stephanie. I would love to.
Personally, I think as long as we make it very clear to guests that it could be used for tracing, that's okay. But just to use it as a list that we can go back to, I don't want to be underhanded in using information.
Sure.
But yeah, we definitely are going to have to make those concessions because if I can only seat 50 people in the restaurant, we're going to have to limit the time that people can be in the restaurant. So yeah, it's a great starting point, but that's something that we're going to have to address guest by guest. You know, are you okay if we share the information that you were in the building or not? Like, I don't know what the legality looks like for that, but it's a great place to start if that's something that's acceptable as far as sharing information. Otherwise, I mean, we would never share guest information with anyone else. Otherwise, we would just use the blast emails for making more reservations or, you know, reaching out just specifically from us.
Yeah, but it's a new world, so we can at least explore it.
It is. Trish, did you have any other comments or questions about this topic?
Well, I'm fine with the work plan, and I want to concur with Joanne, because I went in and looked at, you know, how everybody voted. It was all over the map. All over the map. And, you know, so if we'd had, you know, so things might have ranked differently if there'd just been a little bit of a different nudge. So I think, you know, we all agree that all those priority areas are priorities. And I know communications ranked, I think, number 2. And so, Mayor Pauly, I know I've talked with you about this before. You know, we rely heavily on people being hooked up to getting the e-blast from the city. But, you know, what percentage of the people are hooked up to get the e-blast from the city?
I'd have to call a friend for that one. I don't know the e-blast, but I know for the mayor's newsletter, it goes out to 6,000 different email addresses.
6,000?
6,000. Okay. And I probably can talk with the communications person up in the Highlands, Dinah. Your messaging goes out to how many households or individual email addresses?
Our weekly email goes out to about 3,500 email addresses.
Okay.
And then the Connections News is a print of 5,000 distributed throughout.
Okay. So I'm just putting this out there as a challenge because, you know, to get the, like even all the wonderful communications and, you know, little YouTube things you guys have already created. You know, I guess you can look and see how many hits they've had. It doesn't necessarily mean individual hits.
Right.
But so it's just a challenge, you know, because we don't have our dear Issaquah press anymore, you know.
I know. Well, Trish, it's an excellent point. We are a community right now that does not have any sort of bulletin or paper version of what we do. And I agree with you that there's a community that we're missing. We do everything digitally. So I'm just going to throw that back as a comeback item for City Administrator Bobkowitz that we will explore and talk about. I have people still write me handwritten letters because they don't have a computer and they mail them in, and Joanne knows that because she gets my mail. I have people who leave me sticky notes at the counter because they don't have a computer and they want me to do something. So yeah, we have people in this community who are not wired in. That's absolutely true. City Administrator Bobkowitz?
Yes, I dialed a friend on the e-news and subscription list. It's about 7,000. So that gets the city newsletter as well as the mayor newsletter. You know, it's something that every community grapples with, is how best to reach people. And I think, you know, it's all of the above. We need to be digitally there. We can advertise on Facebook, which we do, and Instagram from time to time. So I think you'll see more of that in addition to relying on people getting our e-newsletters. I think that there are opportunities in the broader world to either advertise. People talked about TV. You can buy ads on cable TV relatively inexpensively. So that may be something we look at as far as the buy local, shop local, dine local campaigns that we're looking at. We've also talked about the value of direct mail. I mean, communities used to send newsletters on a regular basis. You know, that stopped probably from financial reasons more than anything else. But would it make sense for us to send a half-sheet postcard or something in the midst of all this in the summer? You know, encouraging people to shop local, but also pointing them to our online resources so they may not even think about it. So, I mean, those are all parts of communications, and we can have Autumn Monahan, our communications manager, come to this group as well sometime in the next few meetings, and she could talk about what we're looking at and thinking of. So thanks for the feedback.
That is great. Also, Trish, I think one of the other avenues we found to communicate with some of those that are less connected to us is Monica in our human services group that is also under Parks and Community Services had some information that was given out at the food bank with meals, so that we were catching people as they came for groceries or as they came for hot meals, and that was about the census, about making sure that we were reaching those that may not have computers, and making sure that they knew about the census and that there were options on how to provide your information even if you didn't have a computer. So again, maybe even using our social services that we have and having the handout or the card that can go out with whatever they're handing out, if it's diapers or hot meals, groceries, is another thing we can try.
Yeah.
Great idea. Checking down at the comment box, and I think, Shashi, do you have a comment for the group?
Actually, I think it's handled, but still again about how to communicate to people. I think, I don't know if there's anybody who does not watch TV. I would be surprised. And I know our own channel is probably not watched too much by a lot of people in Issaquah. I'm not sure about it. So maybe we can partner with some other local channel. People scroll through different channels. I watch lots of different channels for news. Como 4, 5, 7 sometimes, but mostly CNN, BBC. So I know people have their own favorite channels for even news, and everybody wants to watch news nowadays because of coronavirus. Can we put message through that about to our community somehow, that they should at least go to our channel and watch channel 21, which is very interesting, no doubt, and it will become more interesting as we engage our community. So that's all I had to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashi. And I think City Administrator's suggestion of having our manager of communications come in and talk with the group is a really good one. I think we are through the comments and questions, and I wanted to let you know that our next meeting is on June 11th. And if nobody has any other comments or questions, I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and I would like to thank staff for coming and for presenting today. So thank you all. These are such helpful sessions. Great job.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.